My name is Lauren. I'm 29, and last Saturday was the moment I realized something in my family had snapped for good. It happened the 10th weekend in a row that my sister dumped her kids on me without asking. I had just set my phone on silent to finally rest when she banged on my door like she owned the place. The moment I opened it, she shoved two backpacks into my arms and said, "You're taking them. I don't care what plans you have." I told her calmly, for the first time in years, "I'm not your built-in babysitter." She froze, then her voice exploded through the hallway. The kids flinched, and she pointed at me like I had committed some crime. "You're impossible, Lauren. I'm calling Mom and Dad. They'll deal with you." She stormed off before I could say another word. I thought the worst part was her dragging our parents into it. Again. But an hour later, when I heard the pounding at my door and opened it to see two uniformed officers asking if I was involved in a care-neglect situation, I felt the ground shift under me. My sister had crossed a line I didn't even know she was willing to cross, and whatever came next wasn't going to be simple. Before I tell you how everything spiraled, how my family turned against me, how the situation blew up in ways none of them were prepared for, there's something I need you to understand about how all of this started. If you enjoy intense family drama and real-life revenge stories, make sure to subscribe and stay with me until the end. Because what happened after those officers walked into my apartment changed everything. The officers didn't stay long that night, but their questions replayed in my head long after they left. They asked how long the kids had been with me, whether I had agreed to watch them, and if my sister had contacted me before dropping them off. I answered everything honestly. They didn't say it outright, but I could see it in their eyes. They already knew something wasn't adding up. The kids were fine, fed, playing with their toys. Nothing matched the concerned report they'd been sent for, but the damage was already done. The moment the officers stepped out of my apartment, my phone lit up with a call from my parents. I didn't answer. I knew exactly what they were going to say, and I wasn't ready to hear it. The next morning, they showed up anyway. I had barely poured myself coffee when my mom marched into my living room like she was inspecting a crime scene. "Lauren, what on earth is going on? Your sister said you refused to take the kids and left them crying on the porch." My dad crossed his arms behind her, already disappointed before hearing a single word from me. I kept my voice steady. She dropped them off without asking. Again. And when I finally told her I couldn't do it, she called you. And then she called the police. "You're their aunt," my mom snapped, like that somehow made me responsible for every choice my sister made. "She's doing everything on her own, and you know she's overwhelmed." I almost laughed. Overwhelmed? She had spa days, nights out, brunch plans, and more emergencies than any person I knew. Meanwhile, I was the one rearranging my life every weekend. My dad shook his head. "Lauren, you live alone. You have the time. Your sister needs you." There it was. The same old script. The same family dynamic I grew up with. She was the one who needed protecting, supporting, excusing. I was the one who needed to step up. I didn't argue. There was no point. Every time I tried to defend myself, the conversation twisted back to how I was being insensitive, unhelpful, or dramatic. But something had shifted in me since last night. Hearing the police talk about neglect made me realize how dangerous this situation could get. If my sister could weaponize the system once, she could do it again. And next time, it might not end with a polite conversation. Before my parents left, my mom delivered the line she always saved for when she wanted to shut me down. "Your sister counts on you. Don't make us regret raising a daughter who doesn't care about family." They walked out before I could respond. An hour later, the doorbell rang again. I considered ignoring it, but something in my gut told me not to. When I opened the door, the twins were standing there alone, holding paper cups from a nearby cafe like it was completely normal. No note, no text, no explanation. My stomach tightened. "Where's your mom?" "She said she had errands," one of them said. "She dropped us off downstairs and told us to come up." I looked past them, down the hallway, but my sister was already gone, not even 36 hours after the police, and she was doing it again. I brought the kids inside and tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. When I texted, she replied 3 words that made my chest burn. "They're fine. Relax." I wanted to scream. Not at the kids, but at the situation, at the audacity, at how easily she dismissed something so serious. These weren't packages. They were children. And she was treating them like weekend luggage she could drop off whenever life got inconvenient. A knock on my door broke my thoughts. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Ramirez, the older woman who lived 2 units down. She glanced at the kids, then at me. "Mija, I saw them outside alone earlier. Is everything all right?" I told her the truth, not the dramatic version my sister liked to spread, but the real story. Her expression tightened with concern. "If I see those babies alone again, I'm calling someone. This isn't safe." Her words stuck with me long after she left, because for the first time, someone outside my family could see exactly what was happening, and they weren't making excuses for it. 2 days passed without a word from my sister. No apology, no explanation, nothing. I didn't reach out either. I kept the texts, screenshots, and call logs saved in a folder on my phone, not because I was planning anything yet, but because something in me said I might need them. By midweek, I thought maybe she had finally backed off. Maybe the close call with the officers scared her enough to stop. I was wrong. On Thursday evening, I came home from work exhausted. I had barely dropped my bag when something felt off. My hallway was too quiet, the kind of quiet that usually means trouble. I reached my door and instantly froze. 2 small backpacks sat slumped against the wall. The twins were sitting on the carpeted floor, swinging their legs, eating crackers out of a plastic bag. One of them looked up with a smile. "Hi, Aunt Lauren. Mom said we're sleeping over." I didn't say anything at first. My brain was trying to make sense of what I was seeing. They were alone again. This time for who knew how long. I unlocked my apartment quickly and ushered them inside. "Did your mom come upstairs with you?" I asked. "No," the older twin said. "She told us to wait because you'd be home soon. She had stuff to do." Stuff to do. Always something more important than her own children. I stepped aside for a moment and called her. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. When she finally responded by text, the message was short. "Stop overreacting. They're fine." My hands shook with anger. Not because I had the kids, I loved them, but because she kept crossing lines that put them in danger and treated it like nothing. A sudden knock pulled my focus. When I opened the door, 2 police officers were standing there again. Not the same pair from before, this time a male-female duo, both wearing that professional expression that says they've already heard a story. "Are you Lauren Hale?" the woman asked. "Yes," I said slowly, already feeling my pulse rise. "We received a report," the male officer continued. "There's concern the children here may have been left unattended." There it was again. The same accusation, the same game. I stepped aside and let them in, because refusing would only make things worse. The kids were sitting on the couch, eating snacks and watching a cartoon, completely oblivious to the chaos surrounding them. The officers asked questions, basic ones. How long they'd been with me, whether I agreed to watch them, whether I had tried contacting their mother. I answered everything clearly without shaking or stuttering. The female officer crouched down and spoke to the kids. "Did you walk up here by yourselves? Did anyone stay with you?" The younger twin nodded. "Mom said to sit and wait for Aunt Lauren. She said she had errands." Both officers exchanged a look. Not surprised, not confused. More like they recognized the pattern. "Ms. Hale," the male officer said quietly, "we're not placing fault on you. But someone keeps calling us regarding alleged neglect. We need to document everything." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "She's using you to pressure me," I said. "She drops them off without asking, then calls you when I don't go along with it." "We can't comment on motives," the female officer replied, "but we can note inconsistencies. And there are inconsistencies." They finished their questions. They weren't rude, but there was a seriousness to their tone that hadn't been there during the first visit. Before leaving, the male officer stepped closer and lowered his voice. If this happens again, kids alone in a hallway, unannounced drop-offs, you need to protect yourself. Keep records. Don't engage in arguments. And if you ever feel the situation is unsafe, call us first. Call us first. The irony was painful. After they left, I sat at my kitchen counter, staring at the folder on my phone that held every message, every voicemail, every screenshot. The pile was growing fast. The kids finished their snacks and ran to the bedroom I set up for them on weekends. I stood in the hallway watching them play and felt that cold, hollow fear again. It wasn't just my sister's irresponsibility anymore. She was dragging the police into this like it was a game, and if she kept escalating, someone was going to get hurt. I didn't know it yet, but this second police visit was only the beginning. My sister hadn't even hit her breaking point. That came later. Loud, messy, and right on my doorstep. By Saturday, I told myself I wasn't opening the door for anyone unless they texted first. I needed one weekend, just one, without chaos. I turned my phone on silent and focused on cleaning the apartment, trying to pretend things were normal for a few hours. But late that afternoon, on my way back upstairs from taking out trash, I heard something that made my heart drop. Two small voices coming from the far end of the hallway. I walked closer and found the twins sitting on the floor beside my door, legs pulled up, backpacks on their laps, heads drooping like they were too tired to keep them upright. There was no adult in sight. No note. No message. Nothing. I knelt down. "Hey, how long have you been here?" "We don't know," one whispered. "Mom said to sit here and wait. She said she'd be right back." I felt heat rush to my face. This wasn't a bad decision anymore. This was reckless. Anything could have happened in those minutes, maybe even hours. Before I could say another word, my neighbor, Mrs. Ramirez, stepped out of her unit carrying a bag of folded laundry. When she saw the kids, her expression darkened fast. "Mija, they've been here a while. I checked twice. I didn't see their mother anywhere." My stomach clenched. I thanked her and got the kids inside. Once they were busy with juice boxes and crayons, I called my sister again. Straight to voicemail. The second call went the same way. The third went unanswered too. Minutes later, she finally texted, "Busy, they're fine. Be the adult for once." That message felt like a slap. Anger pulsed behind my ribs. I wasn't the one abandoning children in a hallway. I wasn't the one dumping responsibility on someone else. I wasn't the one calling the police with fake stories. And I wasn't the one disappearing. I stared at her message until the letters blurred. For a moment, I thought about calling the authorities myself, but then I looked at the twins drawing quietly, and a familiar conflict tightened in my chest. They didn't deserve to be dragged into a report because of their mother's negligence. I hated how she used them as shields. I put my phone down and tried to keep the evening calm. But after dinner, there was another knock. This one sharper. Urgent. Mrs. Ramirez stood there, eyes wide, pointing toward the lobby stairs. "Your sister just drove off again," she said. "She didn't even look back to see if the kids were safe. I recorded the last part just in case. This isn't right." She held up her phone. The short clip showed my sister pulling away while the twins sat alone in the hallway. No hesitation. No second glance. My throat tightened. "Thank you," I said quietly. I didn't know what else to say. She put a hand on my shoulder. "If this happens again, I'm calling someone. I love those kids, but this is too much." After she left, I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, thinking about the 2 police visits, the hallway, the lies, the manipulation, the constant guilt tripping. My sister was spiraling and dragging me and her own children down with her. Later that night, a message from my mom flashed across my screen. "Your sister says you refused to take the kids earlier. Why are you doing this to her?" It almost didn't feel real at this point. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't ask if the kids were safe. They didn't ask if I was okay after 2 police visits in 1 week. All they wanted to know was why I wasn't cooperating. I turned the phone face down and sat quietly in the dim light, listening to the twins laugh in the spare room, blissfully unaware. They were the only reason I hadn't exploded yet. But something inside me shifted that night. The calm part of me, the one that always tried folding under pressure to keep the peace, finally cracked. I couldn't keep absorbing this alone, not when the situation was escalating, not when the police were already involved twice, not when my sister was now dropping her kids in hallways and driving off. And as I lay in bed hours later, wide awake while the twins slept peacefully, I felt the first real thought of what would eventually change everything. If she was going to treat me like the problem, I needed to start protecting myself like I wasn't part of her game anymore. The following week, something felt different inside me, like a switch had finally flipped. I didn't wake up angry. I woke up clear. And clarity is dangerous when someone's been using you for years. The first thing I did Monday morning was sit at my kitchen table and organize every piece of proof I had. Not because I planned to use it immediately, but because I wanted control. Something my sister had stolen from me for too long. I started with the texts. Every message where she dumped her kids without asking. Every time she ignored me. Every accusation she threw at me. Every time she told me to step up, stop overreacting, or be the adult. Then I moved on to call logs, missed calls, voicemails filled with guilt trips, screenshots of her telling me she was too busy to care about where her children were. I wrote dates, times, notes, the folder filled quickly. At work, I found myself focusing better than I had in months. I wasn't listening for my phone to buzz with an emergency. I wasn't rearranging my weekend to solve someone else's problems. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't living under her shadow. One afternoon, a coworker invited me to join a small project team, something I would have said no to before because I never knew when my sister would hijack my schedule. This time, I said yes, and it felt good, like reclaiming a piece of my life. Over the next few days, I tested something small. I stopped responding immediately to her messages. When she texted, "I need you Friday," I didn't reply. When she called twice back to back, I let it go to voicemail. Not to be petty, but to see what happened when her control didn't work. At first, nothing. Then came the shift. On Thursday evening, she called again. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, she called my parents. My phone lit up with my mom's name. I didn't answer. A minute after that, my dad. I let it ring. Then came the group call. My mom, dad, and sister, all at once. I watched it blink and disappear without touching it. For the first time ever, I enjoyed the silence. Later that night, I checked my voicemail. My sister's voice trembled with exaggerated frustration. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. I need you this weekend. Don't make a big deal. Just say yes." Then my mom. "Your sister told us you're being difficult. You need to remember family comes first." Then my sister again, this time harsher. "Pick up your phone, Lauren. Don't push me." I saved them all. The next day was quiet, until around 6 in the evening, when there was loud banging on my door. Not knocking, banging. I checked the peephole and saw her standing there with the twins behind her, already looking tired and confused. I didn't open it. She pounded harder. "Lauren, open up! I know you're home!" I stayed silent. Her voice rose. "You think ignoring me changes anything? You think you can get away with this?" Get away with what? Not being her personal childcare service? She slammed her hand against the door again. "Open this door before I—" A voice cut her off. It was Mrs. Ramirez from down the hall. "Enough. Those kids are scared. They shouldn't be dragged into whatever this is." My sister snapped back. "This is none of your business." "It becomes my business," Mrs. Ramirez said sharply, "when children are left in the hallway again." I heard footsteps, voices, tension rising. I still didn't open the door. Eventually, after several minutes of arguing, my sister dragged the kids away, muttering curses under her breath, heels clicking furiously down the hall. Mrs. Ramirez stayed a moment, probably checking if I would open the door. I didn't. When the hallway finally quieted, I exhaled slowly. My sister had escalated again, and this time, there were witnesses. I wrote everything down: time, words, behavior. I saved new voicemails, new texts. Something was building. And even though I hadn't figured out my next move yet, I could feel the direction shifting. She wasn't backing off. She was pushing harder than ever. And I had to be ready for whatever she tried next. By the next week, I thought my sister couldn't surprise me anymore. I'd seen every version of her selfishness: manipulative, dramatic, explosive. I believed I knew all her tactics. And then, she proved me wrong. It happened on a Friday night after a long shift. I came home later than usual, tired but relieved to have a quiet evening. When I reached my door, something felt strange. The deadbolt was unlocked. I always triple-check it before leaving. My chest tightened as I pushed the door open. The TV was on. A half-eaten pizza sat on the coffee table. 2 juice boxes were tipped over on the rug. And sitting on my couch, scrolling through her phone like she lived there, was my sister. The twins were sprawled across the floor, building a fort out of blankets. They didn't even notice me at first. I stared at her. "How did you get in here?" She didn't look up. "Relax, I used the spare key." My stomach dropped. "What spare key?" "The one Mom had. She told me where you keep it." I felt the blood drain from my face. She didn't just cross a line. She walked right into my home without permission and made herself comfortable like she owned the place. I shut the door slowly. "You can't do that. You can't just let yourself in." She finally lifted her eyes, bored and annoyed. "You act like you have something going on. Be grateful the kids have someone responsible around." I needed a break. A break. Like her children were a gym bag she could drop off on someone's floor before heading out to enjoy her night. I looked at the clutter she left behind, the mess she dragged into my home, and something inside me simmered. "You don't get to walk in here without asking." She scoffed. "Stop being dramatic. You live alone. It's not a big deal." I didn't argue. Not in front of the kids. I walked to my bedroom, shut the door, and locked it. For the first time in my own apartment, I felt like a guest in someone else's space. I sat on the edge of my bed and forced my breathing to slow. She had crossed into territory I never thought she'd enter. Dropping kids off was one thing. Weaponizing the police was another. But entering my locked home? That was something entirely different. I waited until she fell asleep on my couch. Then I stepped out quietly, took a picture of the mess, took a picture of her asleep in my living room, and wrote down the time she entered. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. But she left the mess behind. Crumbs, spills, blankets everywhere. On the dining table, a handwritten note in her rushed handwriting. "Thanks again. I'll bring them next week." I stood there holding the note, fingers trembling. Not from fear, but from the realization that this had escalated far past family drama. If she had that key, she could enter any time. Day, night. When I wasn't home, when I was sleeping, when I was working, anything could happen. That afternoon, I changed the locks. Not the cheap ones, the reinforced kind that required a code and a physical key. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my sister. I didn't tell anyone. When evening came, I sat in the quiet of my living room and let myself breathe for the first time in days. No unexpected doorbells, no pounding fists, no screaming accusations, no police at my doorstep. It lasted less than 24 hours. The next night, Saturday, I heard frantic knocking, loud enough to rattle the frame. My phone buzzed from the kitchen, 12 missed calls, all from my sister. I didn't move. Her voice erupted into the hallway. "Lauren, open this door right now. I know you're in there." The knocking got louder, then desperate, and then the screaming started. Words dripping with entitlement and fury. "You think you can shut me out? You think changing a lock means anything? Open this door. The twins' voices were thin, distressed behind her. Mom, stop. I stayed silent. Then a second voice entered the hallway. Steady, stern, familiar. Mrs. Ramirez, this is enough. You're scaring the kids. And you're disturbing the entire floor. My sister snapped, Stay out of this. No, Mrs. Ramirez said. Not this time. I heard her phone click on, recording. My sister kept screaming, threatening, insulting, accusing me of abandoning family, being heartless, being ungrateful. The hallway filled with tension, her rage, the kids' cries, my neighbor's calm challenge. I stood on the other side of the door, heart pounding, knowing this was the moment everything was shifting. And none of them knew yet that someone else was already watching, someone who would contact me the next morning and change the direction of this entire mess. The next morning, a call from an unknown number made it obvious the hallway scene had reached someone who could act on it. A woman introduced herself as a social worker, Annika Patel, and briefly explained that she had reviewed police notes and a video submitted by my neighbor. She wanted to visit my apartment to discuss my sister, her children, and the pattern that had formed around my address. When the call ended, I sat at my kitchen table and let the information settle. For months, I had been painted as difficult and ungrateful. Now, a stranger with no stake in family loyalty believed there was enough concern to open a case. That quiet confirmation did more to steady me than any apology ever could have. Ms. Patel came that afternoon. She looked around, noticed the small room I kept ready for the kids, then asked me to walk her through everything. I described how casual favors turned into automatic weekends, how my sister began arriving without warning, how officers had already stood in my doorway twice, how my niece and nephew had been left waiting alone outside my apartment. Then I handed over the folder I had put together with messages, call logs, dates, notes from Mrs. Ramirez, and the short recording from the hallway. She read in silence, taking her own notes. When she finished, she said her responsibility was to make sure 2 children were safe, not to referee family arguments. Depending on an unwilling relative, leaving kids unsupervised, and calling the police to force cooperation were the kinds of choices her department had to take seriously. Then she asked something no one in my family had bothered to ask. She wanted to know what I wanted for myself. The answer felt small, but heavy. I wanted my niece and nephew secure, and I wanted my life back. I did not want to be written into any plan as the default caregiver. I told her I would give a statement and answer questions, but I would not sign anything that turned years of unpaid, unwanted responsibility into something official. Ms. Patel explained that she would be meeting my sister, that there would likely be conditions, education on parenting, monitoring, written limits about who could watch the kids, and under what circumstances. If the same behavior continued, stronger actions were possible. To anyone on the outside, it might sound severe. To me, it sounded like the first clear boundary that did not rely on me sacrificing more of myself. The next shift came from my parents. After speaking with Ms. Patel, they called, and for the first time their voices did not arrive full of accusations. I could hear confusion, wounded pride, and a new awareness that this situation no longer lived only in private conversations. Their version of events now sat next to reports and case notes with their last name printed on them. We met in a coffee shop instead of in their living room. I brought a short printed timeline and a single page listing the boundaries I was putting in place. I did not raise my voice or ask them to admit they had favored one child over another. I simply told them I would not provide childcare anymore, would not allow access to my home through spare keys, and would not answer calls that treated me as a solution instead of a person. Whether they accepted it was no longer a condition for me to move on. They left that conversation quieter than they arrived. They did not suddenly become different people, but the constant criticism stopped. That silence felt less like punishment and more like space. In the weeks that followed, my sister's life narrowed around the consequences she had never expected to face. Meetings with Ms. Patel, written agreements, rules about supervision, limits on how long the kids could be left with anyone else. Nights out became complicated. Last-minute plans started to fail. The belief that someone would always clean up after her met a system that did not operate on guilt and obligation. A few months later, I moved across town. I picked a smaller apartment, changed my locks and my number, and gave my new information only to people I trusted to respect it. I still heard occasional updates about my niece and nephew, that they were involved in after-school programs, and that their mother was complying because the alternative meant losing far more than a few weekends of freedom. I saw them a few times at family gatherings with clear start and end times. Each visit ended with me driving back to a front door no one else could open. My sister and I have not spoken directly since the night she screamed outside my old place. In the beginning, she sent long messages full of blame and explanations that tried to rewrite history. I did not answer them. Eventually, they stopped arriving. The quiet she once used to punish me turned into a boundary I chose and protected. Looking back, the real turning point for me was not the police or even the social worker. It was the moment I decided that reliability did not mean letting other people spend my time, my energy, and my peace without asking. Family can be a source of comfort, but it can also become a shield people hide behind while they step over every limit you set. Learning to say no without apology was the first honest act of self-respect I had shown myself in years. If anyone hears my story and recognizes pieces of their own, I hope they remember this. That sick feeling in your stomach when a line is crossed is not disloyalty. Keeping records when something feels wrong is not cruelty. Stepping back from people who only reach out when they need something is not selfishness. You are allowed to protect your home, your time, and your peace, even when the people pushing against your boundaries share your blood. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do for yourself is to stop being the one everyone else is allowed to break.